I've always been the responsible one in my family. The eldest of two, I somehow ended up with this invisible badge of grown-up, even though I was only 18. I liked planning things, saving money, organizing my life so that everything would run smoothly. My little brother, Jake, on the other hand, he was the complete opposite. Impulsive, reckless, always chasing the next thrill. I loved him, truly, but I often wondered how we were even related sometimes. Summer had just started, and while most kids my age were binging shows or hanging out at the mall, I was counting every single dollar I had saved over the past 2 years. College was around the corner, and I wanted my dorm to feel like home from day one. I had a checklist: bedding, kitchen essentials, a small rug I'd been eyeing forever. I wanted it to be perfect. Mom and Dad were busy with work as usual. They trusted me to handle the little things, like budgeting my money or making sure Jake didn't get into too much trouble. And for the most part, I did a good job. I balanced school, extracurriculars, and the looming excitement of leaving home. Everything felt right. I remember the day vividly. I had just finished organizing my savings into a separate account specifically for dorm essentials. I logged in to double-check the balance one last time before heading out for a summer trip with friends. And that's when my stomach dropped. The number staring back at me was 0. Nothing. Gone. Every penny I had painstakingly saved, gone. My hand shook as I refreshed the page, thinking maybe it was a glitch. But no, it wasn't. I blinked, hoping the numbers would magically correct themselves. They didn't. I felt a rush of panic and disbelief swirl inside me. Could it be a bank error? Maybe someone had hacked the system? My mind raced, jumping to every worst-case scenario. And then the other thought hit me, a thought I didn't want to admit. What if it wasn't a mistake? What if someone in my own family had taken it? I closed my laptop slowly, trying not to cry. My heart pounded as I realized that this was no ordinary problem. This wasn't something that could be fixed with a phone call to the bank or a quick apology. Whoever had done this had shattered my trust. And they had done it quietly, deliberately. I didn't know it yet, but that moment would mark the beginning of the worst, most shocking summer of my life. A summer where I ended up the nightmare. I couldn't focus on anything else that day. Every time I tried to distract myself, my mind kept going back to that empty account. How could all my savings vanish in an instant? 2 years of careful budgeting, cutting back on little luxuries, working odd jobs during weekends. Gone. And the worst part? The thought that someone I trusted could have taken it. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at my laptop like it might magically reveal the truth if I looked long enough. My parents were in the living room talking about something trivial, work schedules, car maintenance. I didn't even hear the words. I couldn't bring myself to tell them yet. I wasn't sure I was ready to admit that my own brother might have done this. But the thought kept nagging at me. Jake had been unusually secretive lately. He spent hours on his phone, disappeared without telling anyone where he was going, and he had been bragging about a weekend surprise he and his friends were planning. At the time, I thought he was just being dramatic, but now I wasn't so sure. I tried calling the bank, my voice shaking as I explained the situation to a customer service representative. They were polite, but vague. They said, "We'll need to investigate." That answer did nothing to calm the storm brewing inside me. I hung up, frustration turning into a mix of anger and fear. I decided I couldn't wait around. I needed to find out what happened, and fast. I started retracing every step I could think of, checking my online banking alerts, remembering the last time I used my debit card, who had access to my account information, and then it hit me. The weekend before, Jake had asked to borrow my card for emergency cash. I remember hesitating, thinking he could just ask our parents, but he had pleaded, and I had given in. I had trusted him. And now, I felt my stomach twist with dread. I couldn't believe it. My own little brother. I paced the kitchen, trying to keep my emotions in check. I wanted to scream, cry, throw things. Instead, I took a deep breath and told myself I had to be calm. I had to know the truth before making any decisions. I decided to confront him. Not in anger at first. I needed him to admit it. I walked down the hall, toward his room, my heart pounding like a drum. I knocked on his door. "Jake?" I called. He peeked out, trying to hide something behind his back. "Hey, Claire, what's up?" His voice was too casual, too rehearsed. "I need to ask you something," I said, my voice steady, despite the storm inside me. "Did you take money from my account?" Jake froze. He opened his mouth, closed it, shuffled his feet. I don't know what you're talking about," he muttered. My stomach dropped. That's when I realized he wasn't going to tell the truth easily. He was lying. I wanted to scream, but instead, I said quietly, almost to myself, "I'll find out, Jake. You can't hide from this." And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't admitted before. This wasn't just about the money. This was about trust. And he had already broken it. But what I didn't know yet was just how far he had gone and how messy things were about to get. I couldn't wait any longer. That night, I confronted Jake properly in his room. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say 1,000 times in my head, but when I stood in front of him, my words felt small compared to the anger boiling inside me. "Jake," I said, my voice sharper than I intended, "I know you took my money." He froze like a deer caught in headlights. For a second, he didn't say a word, and I almost thought he might deny it. But then he sighed, leaned back in his chair, and muttered, "Okay, maybe I did." I felt a mix of relief and rage. Relief because at least he admitted it. Rage because it confirmed everything I feared. My little brother, my own family, had betrayed me in the worst way possible. "Why, Jake?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why would you do this? I saved that money for college, for my dorm. Do you even realize what this means?" He shrugged, looking anywhere but me. "It was just a weekend. We wanted to go to the city, have some fun. I didn't think it would matter." I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the quiet room. It mattered. It mattered so much. That money was my independence, Jake. I worked for it, sacrificed for it, and you just took it. He avoided my gaze, mumbling something about paying me back. But it wasn't enough, not even close. This wasn't about repayment. This was about trust, about respect, about not having your efforts crushed by someone who's supposed to love you. "I can't just let this go," I said, my voice trembling, but firm. "I can't. You need to understand the consequences of what you've done." He looked up at me then, fear and guilt flashing in his eyes. I didn't think it would get this bad. I just wanted a fun weekend. I didn't mean... Didn't mean me, Jake," I cut him off. "You made a choice, and now you have to deal with it." I left his room that night with my stomach twisted in knots. Part of me wanted to tell Mom and Dad immediately, to make him face them. But another part of me hesitated. I didn't want this to turn into a lecture session or a fight that got swept under the rug. I needed proof, a way to make sure he couldn't deny it later. So I made a decision. I would report the fraud to the bank. I would reclaim what was mine, and I would make sure Jake understood the full weight of his actions. That night, I sat in my room, staring at my empty account once more. I felt a strange mix of fear, anger, and determination. I knew the next steps wouldn't be easy, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let this ruin my life. Little did I know, the battle had only just begun, and the consequences of this betrayal would ripple far beyond a single weekend. The next morning, I knew I couldn't handle this alone anymore. I needed my parents to know. I waited until breakfast, trying to appear calm, while my mind raced. Mom was flipping pancakes, Dad scrolling through his emails at the table, completely unaware of the storm about to hit their family. I took a deep breath. Mom, Dad, something happened, I started, my voice shaking slightly. Both of them looked up immediately, sensing the seriousness in my tone. "What is it, Claire?" Mom asked, concern already written across her face. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my emotions from spilling over. My savings. My college savings. It's gone. Someone withdrew it. Someone I trusted. Dad's eyes narrowed. Gone? What do you mean gone? Are you sure it's not a bank mistake? I checked, Dad. I logged in multiple times. It's not a mistake, I said, my voice firmer now. I think Jake took it. For a moment, there was silence. Mom's face went pale and Dad rubbed his forehead like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Jake, Dad said slowly, disbelief in his voice. Are you sure? Maybe there's some explanation. He wouldn't just... He would, I interrupted, feeling a mix of anger and hurt. He confronted me last night. He admitted it. He said he wanted to use the money for a weekend trip with his friends. He didn't think it mattered. Mom sank into her chair, her hands covering her mouth. Oh, Claire, I'm so sorry. I can't believe he would do something like that. I know, I said, tears threatening to fall. It's not just about the money. It's about trust. It's about feeling safe in my own family. And he broke that. Dad's expression softened, but there was tension in his voice. We'll handle this, Claire, but you need to understand, he's still learning. He made a mistake, and we need to guide him. I shook my head. This isn't about a lecture, Dad. I can't just move on like it's nothing. He needs to face real consequences, and I need my money back. Now. Mom looked between us, clearly torn. Well, help you, but yelling or punishing him harshly won't solve this. Let's think this through. I knew she was trying to calm the situation, but inside I was boiling. I felt powerless for the first time in my life. I had saved, planned, and sacrificed, and now my hard work had been stolen by someone who was supposed to be family. Little did I know, getting my money back would be far more complicated than I imagined. And the truth about Jake's choices would shock me even more than the theft itself. I called the bank first thing that morning. My hands were still trembling, but I tried to keep my voice steady. I need to report fraud on my account, I told the representative, explaining the situation as clearly as I could. They asked questions, ran security checks, and told me they'd start an investigation. I hung up, feeling a tiny spark of hope, but it was quickly smothered by frustration. The process was slow, bureaucratic, and painfully impersonal. I had all my savings on the line, and the bank's polite assurances didn't make me feel any safer. Every time I logged into my account, I felt sick. Each empty balance screen reminded me of the betrayal. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, and I kept replaying the last conversation with Jake over and over in my head. How could someone I trusted so completely do something so thoughtless? I spent the next few days gathering every bit of evidence I could. Receipts, transaction histories, timestamps. I wanted everything documented. Concrete proof that Jake had taken the money. I couldn't rely on my word alone, not after what had happened. Meanwhile, Jake tried to act normal. He would joke around, pretend like nothing had happened, but I could see the guilt simmering beneath the surface. It made me angrier. Every laugh, every casual comment was a reminder of what he had done and how little he seemed to grasp the seriousness of it. One afternoon, I overheard him on the phone with a friend, casually talking about spending money, my money, on things I had planned for myself. That was the last straw. My anger boiled over. I decided then that I wasn't just going to sit back and wait. I needed action. I called the bank again, insisting on speaking to someone higher up. I explained, calmly but firmly, that this wasn't just a technical issue, it was a betrayal, a theft, and it needed to be treated as such. The representative finally agreed to escalate my case. They promised to investigate the withdrawals and work with law enforcement if necessary. I felt a small relief, but the waiting, the uncertainty, was torture. At night, I would lie awake imagining what I would do if I never got my money back. Would I have to postpone college? Would I have to cut back on my dorm plans? The thought made my chest tighten. And yet, through the frustration and fear, I began to feel something else. Determination. I wasn't going to let this define me. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much to let one selfish act ruin my independence. Little did I know, the truth about Jake's actions would soon come out in a way I hadn't expected, and it would leave me both relieved and completely stunned. A few days later, I got the call I'd been both hoping for and dreading. The bank had completed their preliminary investigation. My stomach knotted as I listened to the representative explain the findings. "Ms. Clare," they said cautiously, "our records show that the withdrawals match a card in your name used from a location consistent with someone in your household. And we also have timestamps that match the weekend you mentioned. Based on this, it appears your brother accessed your account." I felt my knees go weak. Proof. Concrete, undeniable proof. Jake had taken the money. It was no longer a theory, no longer a suspicion. He had done it. When I confronted him again, I didn't even need to explain the evidence. I laid the bank statements and transaction records on the table, and the color drained from his face. I didn't mean for it to get this bad," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Didn't mean it." I snapped, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "Jake, this isn't about intention. This is about reality. You stole my money, my savings, my independence. And now you expect me to just forgive you because it was fun?" He swallowed hard, eyes downcast. For the first time, I saw real fear in him, a recognition of the consequences he couldn't run from. "I'll pay it back. I promise," he muttered. "It's not just about the money," I said, my chest tight. "It's about trust, Jake. You've broken it, and it's going to take a long time to repair. You can't just take what isn't yours and expect everything to be okay." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of what had just been revealed. I wanted to scream, to cry, to shake him until he understood the full gravity of his actions. But instead, I focused on what I needed to do next. I realized something important in that moment. I wasn't just reclaiming money. I was reclaiming my voice, my independence, and my right to stand up for myself. Jake needed to learn accountability, and I needed to prove that I wouldn't be taken advantage of. And that's when I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't just going to get my money back. I was going to take control of the story. I would show Jake, my family, and anyone else watching that I could turn this betrayal into a lesson in independence and resilience. Little did I know, putting the story out into the world would spark reactions I hadn't expected and force Jake to face not just me, but the public accountability of his choices. I knew I had to act fast. Waiting for Jake to repay me wasn't enough. I needed a plan to reclaim what was rightfully mine and to make sure he understood the consequences of his actions. I wasn't going to let this slide. First, I set up a meeting with the bank again. I brought all the evidence, transaction records, the timestamps, screenshots of my account before and after the withdrawals. I explained clearly what had happened, leaving no room for doubt. The bank staff were professional but sympathetic. "We'll do everything we can to reverse these transactions," they assured me. Next, I turned my focus to Jake. I sat him down and laid out exactly what I expected. No excuses, no pleading. You will repay this money starting immediately, and you will understand the seriousness of your actions. Trust isn't something you can just break and rebuild overnight. He nodded, pale and silent, but I could see the shame in his eyes. For the first time, I realized that my assertiveness was making him truly grasp the impact of what he had done. Even with the bank's intervention, I knew this wasn't just about money. It was about showing that I could stand up for myself, that I didn't need to rely on others to fight for my independence. For too long, I had been the responsible one, quietly managing everything, while Jake got away with impulsive behavior. Not anymore. I also documented everything, not for anyone else, but for myself. Every step I took, every conversation I had, I wrote down in a notebook. I wanted clarity, and I wanted proof, not that Jake needed it, but to remind myself that I was capable of handling tough situations. The more I took control, the stronger I felt. I realized that being betrayed by someone I loved didn't have to break me. In fact, it was teaching me something far more important: resilience. I was learning to navigate consequences, face conflict, and protect myself in ways I never had before. And then it hit me. If I could turn this personal disaster into a lesson for myself, maybe I could turn it into something bigger. I could share my story. Not to shame Jake publicly, but to show others what standing up for yourself looks like. Maybe, just maybe, turning this betrayal into public accountability could make the lesson even more real. For him, and for anyone listening. Little did I know, sharing my story would unleash reactions I hadn't anticipated, and force both me and Jake to confront the summer in ways we could never have imagined. After days of internal debate, I finally made the decision. I would share my story online, not to humiliate Jake, but to hold him accountable, and to show others that even in the face of betrayal, you could reclaim your independence. I wrote everything down, carefully. Every detail. My savings, the confrontation, the lies, the bank investigation. I kept it factual, but I didn't hold back on my feelings. The fear, the heartbreak, the anger, and the resolve that had grown inside me. When I hit post, a strange mix of relief and nervousness washed over me. My story was out there for anyone to see. Within hours, I started getting responses, messages from strangers who had gone through similar experiences, who understood that gut-wrenching betrayal from someone you trust. People shared their own stories, offered support, and some even congratulated me for standing up for myself. Meanwhile, I noticed Jake's behavior changing. He became quieter, more introspective, almost sheepish. I didn't gloat. I didn't call him out directly, but I could see the effect the story had on him. For the first time, he realized that his actions didn't just affect our household. They had real consequences, and people were seeing them. One afternoon, he came to me quietly. He came up to me and he said, "Claire, I read what you wrote. I get it now. I really do." I looked at him, measuring my response. "It's not just about understanding, Jake. It's about doing better. And that starts with fixing what you broke." He nodded. "I'll make it right, I promise." It wasn't a perfect resolution, but I could see a shift. He was finally facing the weight of his choices, and I wasn't going to carry the anger alone anymore. Sharing my story hadn't just helped me. It had forced him to confront himself in a way I couldn't have done alone. I also realized something else. People believed me. They supported me. And in that validation, I found a sense of empowerment I hadn't known before. I wasn't just a victim of a betrayal. I was a young woman capable of standing up, reclaiming what was mine, and teaching lessons through my own actions.
But the family fallout wasn't over yet. My parents, seeing both our sides, had to step in and navigate the tension that hung in the air like an uninvited shadow. Even after sharing my story online, the tension at home didn't vanish overnight. My parents had to step in, mediating conversations between Jake and me that were long, uncomfortable, and emotionally charged. Mom sat us both down one evening. Claire, Jake, this has gone far enough. We need honesty, accountability, and a plan to move forward. Jake, you need to face the consequences. Claire, you need to trust that we'll guide him. Jake looked down, his shoulders slumping. I know. I screwed up. I didn't think, I didn't care, but I get it now. I really do. I could see the genuine shame in his eyes, and for the first time, I allowed a small sense of relief to seep in. The anger hadn't completely gone, but it was tempered with the knowledge that he was finally taking responsibility. We spent the next few days setting rules and boundaries. Jake would repay me, step by step. More importantly, he had to rebuild the trust he had shattered. It wouldn't be easy, and I knew it would take time, but it was a start. Meanwhile, life went on. I packed for college with a mix of excitement and lingering anxiety. My dorm essentials were ready, thanks to the reclaimed money and the support I had rallied online. But I still felt a cautious wariness. Trust, once broken, wasn't something you could easily repair. Every laugh, every casual comment from Jake reminded me of the summer's chaos. Through it all, though, I felt stronger. I had faced betrayal, stood my ground, and reclaimed my independence. I realized that growth often comes from moments you never want to live through. This disaster had tested me in ways I hadn't imagined, and I had come out more resilient, more assertive, and more self-reliant than ever. And yet, even as I stepped into this new chapter of my life, I knew the lesson wasn't just about money or independence. It was about family, accountability, and the fragile, complicated bonds that tie us together, even when they feel broken. Little did I know, the final pieces of this summer story, the resolution, the reflection, and the real emotional payoff were still waiting to unfold. By the time college move-in day arrived, I felt a strange mix of excitement, exhaustion, and quiet satisfaction. The summer had been a roller coaster, one I would never forget, filled with betrayal, confrontation, and hard-earned lessons. I carried my carefully packed boxes into the dorm, each item a small victory, proof that I had reclaimed what was mine, that I had taken control of a situation that could have completely derailed me. Jake had started making real efforts to repay the money and, more importantly, to rebuild the trust he had shattered. He wasn't perfect, and I wasn't naive enough to think a single summer of reckoning would erase the hurt entirely. But he was trying. He called, texted, and sometimes visited, apologizing, asking questions, and listening. For the first time, I felt that maybe, just maybe, our bond could survive this. I also reflected on the public side of my story. Sharing it online had been nerve-wracking. I had feared judgment, criticism, or worse, that it would spiral out of control. Instead, the response had been overwhelmingly supportive. Strangers reached out, telling me their own stories of betrayal, theft, or broken trust. Some had been through worse situations, others just small betrayals that had shaken them. The common thread was that taking a stand, reclaiming your voice, and asserting independence mattered, maybe more than we realize. It hit me then how much this experience had shaped me. I had always been the responsible one, the quiet problem solver, but now I understood something deeper. Responsibility wasn't about silently carrying the weight of others' mistakes. It was about taking action, setting boundaries, and ensuring that respect and trust were not optional in your life. College was supposed to be about new beginnings, But for me, it was also about carrying the lessons of the past into the future. I felt a newfound confidence in myself. I had faced betrayal head on, navigated family conflict, and come out the other side stronger. And I realized that even though money, possessions, and plans could be taken, my resilience, my voice, and my ability to act decisively were mine forever. As I unpacked the last of my boxes in my dorm room, I paused and looked around. This wasn't just a room filled with things. It was a testament to perseverance, a symbol of what happens when you refuse to be a victim. I thought of Jake, my parents, and even the strangers who had reached out online. In a strange way, that summer had connected me to people I hadn't known I needed, people who validated my feelings, my efforts, and my strength. Even as I settled into college life, I knew the shadow of that summer would always linger. Trust, once broken, is fragile. But I also knew that independence, resilience, and self-respect are stronger than any betrayal. I carried that knowledge with me, ready to face challenges I hadn't even imagined yet. And in the quiet of my dorm room, I whispered to myself, I may have been betrayed, but I never lost myself. That realization, more than anything else, felt like victory. Little did I know, reflecting on all of this was not just the end of the nightmare, it was the start of understanding the deeper lessons life had been trying to teach me all along. Sitting in my dorm that first night, I couldn't help but replay the entire summer in my mind. Every moment. The panic of discovering my account was empty, the confrontation with Jake, the sleepless nights worrying about college, the slow process with the bank, and finally, the decision to share my story online. Every single moment had left its mark on me. I thought about Jake, sitting at home, finally facing the weight of his choices. I didn't hate him. I never could. But I had learned to hold firm, to make sure my boundaries weren't crossed again. I had learned that love doesn't mean letting people hurt you without consequence. Sometimes love means standing up, even when it's hard, even when it's someone you care about. And then there was me, Claire, the responsible one, the planner, the careful saver. I had thought that I would be crushed by this betrayal, that my carefully laid plans would crumble, that my dreams would be delayed. But I hadn't just survived, I had grown. I had learned that independence isn't just about money or possessions, it's about voice, courage, and refusing to let someone else define your worth or your life. I also realized something important about family. Betrayal doesn't have to mean the end. It doesn't have to mean hatred. It can mean lessons learned, accountability taken, and relationships rebuilt, though differently, more honestly, and with more care. I could see it in Jake's eyes when he admitted his mistake. I could feel in the cautious trust that started to return. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. I looked around my dorm room, at the little rug I had bought, at the neatly folded bedding, at the small desk where I would study. Each item was more than just a possession. It was proof that I had reclaimed my life, that I had turned a disaster into a victory, and that I could navigate the chaos of life with strength I didn't know I possessed. I whispered to myself, almost like a promise, I may have lost trust, but I never lost myself, and I never will. That summer had been a disaster in many ways, but it had also been a turning point. It had taught me resilience, independence, and the power of standing up for yourself, even against someone you love. It had shown me that betrayal, while painful, can be transformed into growth, accountability, and unexpected empowerment. And as I finally settled into my dorm bed, I felt a strange sense of peace. I knew challenges would come, mistakes would be made, and people would disappoint me again. But I also knew this. No matter what happens, I have the strength to reclaim my life, to face betrayal head on, and to walk forward with my head held high. Because in the end, it wasn't just about a stolen savings account. It was about learning who I really am and realizing that nothing, not even betrayal, could ever take that away from me.